When a homeless man approached Karoline Leavitt asking for just $1, no one expected what would happen next. What started as a simple act of kindness would spark a national movement, reunite a broken family, and change lives forever. The city's heartbeat was relentless. Cars honked, pedestrians weaved through the streets, and the hum of conversations filled the air. On the corner of Broad Street and 17th Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio, a man sat slumped against the wall of an old convenience store. His clothes were worn, layers that barely kept the biting winter wind at bay. Beside him, a cardboard sign read, "Anything helps." God bless. His name was Leonard, though most people didn't care to know it. At 42, he had been living on the streets for nearly a year, a series of misfortunes stripping him of everything he once held dear. Each day was a gamble. Sometimes a passerby would toss a few coins his way, but more often they hurried past, avoiding his eyes. Leonard adjusted his beanie and shivered, watching as shoes of every kind passed him: high heels, sneakers, polished loafers. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something different. A pair of sleek, understated boots stopped just feet away from him. They weren't flashy, but they carried the quiet confidence of someone who stood out without trying. Leonard glanced up, his curiosity piqued. Standing there was a young woman, tall and poised, her hands resting casually in the pockets of a tailored coat. Her blonde hair caught the faint sunlight, and Leonard squinted. He recognized her face but couldn't immediately place it. The woman was waiting at the corner, glancing at her phone, seemingly unaware of the attention she was drawing. People around whispered, some pulling out their phones discreetly to snap pictures. Leonard hesitated. He wasn't one to approach anyone unless they made eye contact first, but something about her demeanor struck him. She wasn't in a rush like everyone else. There was a quiet determination, a focus that seemed out of place amidst the city's chaos. Taking a breath, Leonard spoke up, his voice dry from the cold. "Hey, miss," he called, forcing a smile. "Can you spare $1?" The woman froze, her head tilting slightly, as if confirming she'd heard correctly. Slowly, she turned to face Leonard, her expression unreadable. For a moment, the world around them seemed to slow down. Leonard braced himself for rejection. He was used to it. But what happened next was anything but ordinary. "What do you need it for?" she asked, her voice calm yet direct, carrying a subtle intensity. The question caught Leonard off guard. It wasn't rude or dismissive, but there was a weight to it, as if she genuinely cared about his answer. Leonard's throat tightened. He hadn't expected a conversation. "Well," he began, rubbing his hands together for warmth, "a cup of coffee would be nice. Maybe a sandwich if I'm lucky." His voice faltered. There was something unsettling about being questioned, but there was no malice in her tone, just curiosity. She stepped closer, her phone now forgotten in her pocket. Leonard could feel the stares of others, the silent judgment of people wondering why someone like her would bother with a man like him. He wanted to shrink away, but her gaze held him there. "What's your name?" she asked. "Leonard," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded slightly, her brow furrowing as if processing something deeper. "I'm Karoline," she said simply. There was no arrogance, no self-importance, just an unexpected sincerity. The hum of the city returned, but something in that exchange felt charged, as if this brief moment would lead to something far greater. Karoline crouched down to meet Leonard at eye level, a move that startled him. No one had ever done that before. "How long have you been out here?" she asked, her tone steady but laced with quiet concern. Leonard hesitated. Sharing his story wasn't something he usually did. People didn't care about the why, only the spectacle of his misfortune. But there was something disarming about her, a sharpness softened by empathy. "Almost a year now," he admitted. "Lost my job after the plant shut down. Then my health took a turn. Couldn't keep up with rent." He paused, swallowing hard. "It's been downhill ever since." Karoline listened intently, her eyes narrowing, not out of judgment but focus. It was a look Leonard wasn't used to, a mix of curiosity and resolve, as if she were already formulating a plan. "What about family?" she asked. Leonard's jaw tightened, and he shook his head. "Don't have much of that anymore. My folks passed years ago. My brother, well, we haven't talked in ages." He chuckled bitterly. "Not much left to lose when you've already lost it all." Karoline was quiet for a moment, weighing his words. Then, without breaking eye contact, she reached into her pocket. Leonard's pulse quickened. He'd asked for $1, just one, but her movement suggested something different. When her hand emerged, she wasn't holding a single bill, but a crisp $100 note. The sight made Leonard blink in disbelief. "Here," Karoline said, extending it toward him. "This should cover more than coffee." Leonard stared, stunned. "Are you serious?" he finally managed, his voice cracking. "Why would you do that?" Karoline tilted her head slightly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Because I've seen what happens when people get a real chance, and I believe in paying it forward." The simplicity of her answer left Leonard speechless. But before he could respond, she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a softer yet firm tone. "But listen, this isn't just about the money. I want you to promise me something." "What's that?" Leonard asked, gripping the bill like it might vanish. Her expression grew serious. "If I help you today, you've got to help yourself tomorrow. Deal?" Leonard felt a lump rise in his throat. The words hit harder than he expected. For the first time in forever, someone wasn't just handing him a lifeline. They were challenging him to climb out of the hole he'd fallen into. He nodded, unable to find the right words. "Good," Karoline said, standing back up. She glanced around at the gathering crowd, her calm demeanor unshaken by the attention. Leonard noticed people recording the interaction on their phones, his cheeks burning with a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. Karoline pulled out a small notepad and pen from her coat, scribbling something quickly. She tore off the page and handed it to him. "Go to this address tomorrow morning. They'll help you out. Tell them Karoline sent you." Leonard unfolded the note, his hands trembling slightly. It was the address of a local shelter and resource center, one he'd heard of but had always been too proud or ashamed to visit. "I'll make sure they're expecting you," she added, her voice unwavering. The air around them shifted as Leonard clutched the paper and the money. It wasn't just kindness. It was hope, a fragile, flickering light in a world that had long been dark. Leonard sat there, staring at the $100 bill and the note, his mind racing between disbelief and cautious optimism. Karoline didn't leave immediately. She stood there, watching him with a quiet intensity. "Why do you care?" Leonard asked, his voice shaky. "You don't know me." Karoline's gaze softened. "Because everyone has a story, Leonard. Yours just hasn't been told yet. And honestly, if I can do something to help, why wouldn't I?" Leonard was taken aback. He'd heard empty words before, but her tone carried a conviction that felt real. Still, skepticism gnawed at him. "You don't owe me anything," he said, his voice firmer. "I've been out here long enough to know people don't just stop to help without expecting something." Karoline crouched down again, leveling her gaze with his. "I don't expect anything," she said. "But I do believe small actions can ripple into something bigger. I've spent enough time fighting for causes to know that real change starts with people like you." She gestured to the note. "That place has resources, job programs, counseling. All I'm asking is that you show up." Leonard swallowed hard, glancing at the note again. "And what if I can't do it? What if I screw it up?" Karoline smiled faintly, shaking her head. "Everyone screws up, Leonard. But giving up, that's the only way you lose." Her words landed with a force he wasn't prepared for. The noise of the city seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet strength in her voice. The crowd had thickened, phones now openly pointed in their direction. Someone murmured, "Is that Karoline Leavitt?" Leonard glanced nervously at the attention. He wasn't used to being seen like this. "Ignore them," Karoline said softly, as if reading his mind. "This is about you and me right now. No one else matters. Leonard felt a strange relief wash over him. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel invisible. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'll go. I'll show up." Karoline's expression softened, a genuine smile breaking through. "That's all I wanted to hear." She stood up, brushing off her knees, and glanced at the crowd. "And Leonard," she added, her voice louder now as if speaking for everyone to hear. "You've got more strength in you than you realize. Don't forget that." Leonard blinked, overwhelmed by gratitude and a flicker of pride. He wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he nodded, clutching the note tightly like a lifeline. As Karoline turned to leave, the crowd parted for her, their whispers growing louder. Leonard watched her disappear into the city, her figure blending into the stream of people. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of something he thought he'd lost. Hope. And as he looked at the note again, he knew this was the first step toward reclaiming his life. The next morning, Leonard stood outside the address Karoline had given him, a modest brick building on a quieter side of Cleveland. Its entrance bore a simple sign, Hope Outreach Resource Center. A small stream of people filtered in and out, some carrying grocery bags, others looking as uncertain as Leonard felt. He clutched the note in his pocket, his fingers tracing the edges. The $100 bill was still tucked safely in his jacket. Part of him wanted to save it, to hold on to her generosity as proof that yesterday had happened. But another part, stirred by her words, whispered that this wasn't just about money. It was about a chance to start over. Taking a deep breath, Leonard stepped inside. The warmth enveloped him, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, looked up from her desk. "How can I help you today?" Leonard hesitated before sliding the note across the counter. Karoline sent me. Said I should come here." Her eyes flicked to the paper and a knowing smile spread across her face. "You must be Leonard. We've been expecting you." She stood, motioning for him to follow. "Come on, let's get you started." The next few hours passed in a blur. Leonard met with a caseworker who listened to his story without judgment, outlining a plan to get him back on his feet. They set him up with a temporary bed, arranged a doctor's appointment for his health issues, and connected him with a job training program. It was overwhelming, but for the first time in years, Leonard felt like the pieces of his life were being picked up and put back together. Later that evening, sitting on the edge of his cot, he replayed the past 24 hours, the kindness of a stranger, the offer of help, the simple act of being seen. It felt surreal, but he believed it was possible. Meanwhile, outside the shelter, Karoline's gesture had begun to ripple far beyond what either of them imagined. A video of their interaction, taken by a bystander, had gone viral overnight, spreading across social media with headlines praising the young political figure's unexpected compassion. The footage showed Karoline kneeling beside Leonard, handing him the money and speaking words of encouragement that struck a chord with millions. Some called it a calculated move, others a rare act of humanity from someone in her position. Regardless, it had captured something raw and powerful. People from all walks of life began reaching out to Hope Outreach, offering donations and support inspired by Karoline's actions. Leonard had no idea his story was at the center of a national conversation. He was too busy attending his first counseling session, filling out job applications, and learning to believe in himself again. Across the country, the video sparked a movement. In Chicago, a woman paid for a homeless man's meal and shared it online with the hashtag #KindnessChallenge. In Atlanta, a group of students volunteered at a shelter, citing Leonard's story as their inspiration. As Leonard lay down that night, the weight of the past year felt lighter. Somewhere out there, the woman who had stopped to help him was making waves, but his focus was simple. Take it one day at a time and honor the promise he'd made. By the end of the week, Leonard noticed changes, within himself and around him. At the shelter, staff treated him with kindness, offering not just support, but encouragement. "Your story's not over yet," one said, and Leonard felt a flicker of pride. Word of his journey spread quietly within the shelter community. "If you can do it, maybe I can too," one man said, giving Leonard a pat on the back. Outside, the video had exploded, racking up millions of views. News outlets dissected every detail, while viewers shared their thoughts online. "This is leadership with heart," one tweet read. "Karoline showed us what's possible," another posted. Leonard learned about the attention when a staff member showed him the video. Watching himself on screen, he barely recognized the man with hollow eyes, but it reminded him how far he could rise. Karoline stayed silent amid the buzz, refusing interviews and avoiding the spotlight. To her, this wasn't about praise, it was about Leonard. Behind the scenes, she ensured the shelter received substantial donations to expand its programs, helping more people like him. The video sparked a larger movement. People shared acts of kindness with the hashtag #PayItForward, and local organizations reported surges in volunteers. For Leonard, the ripple effect grew personal one evening in the shelter's common room. A man approached him, hesitant. "Leonard?" he asked. Leonard squinted, then froze. "Paul?" It was his younger brother, the one he hadn't spoken to in over a decade. The weight of lost years hung between them. "I saw the video," Paul admitted, sitting beside him. "I didn't know things had gotten so bad. I should have reached out sooner." Leonard shook his head, fighting tears. "It's not your fault. I didn't make it easy to find me." Paul gripped his shoulder. "I pushed you away after Dad died. I was angry, at everything. But I'm here now." Leonard's mind flashed back to their last fight. Paul blaming him for not holding the family together. Leonard storming off, too proud to admit he was drowning too. Now Paul's eyes were softer, regretful. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. The reunion was bittersweet, a reminder of what was lost, but a chance to rebuild. Leonard felt a tear slip down his cheek, and Paul pulled him into a rough, wordless hug. For the first time, Leonard didn't feel alone. As weeks passed, Leonard saw his story less as a tragedy and more as a testament to resilience. He started a job training program, his hands steady as he filled out forms. The shelter staff cheered his progress, and Paul visited often, bringing coffee and stories of their childhood. Outside, Karoline's act had ignited a quiet revolution. Communities rallied, strangers helped strangers, all sparked by one moment on a Cleveland street. Leonard carried a renewed purpose, fueled by the kindness of a woman who gave him more than money. She gave him hope. And though the road ahead was long, he walked it with a strength he hadn't known he had. Knowing his story, now told, had changed not just his life, but countless others. Thank you for watching till the end video. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories.